This story is called Black War Veteran Enters a Luxury Store, Staff Calls Security on Him Until He Pulls Out His Medal of Honor. Hey, before we get into today's video, I need your help. Subscribing is one of the best ways to support us. It's fast, free, and helps us continue to bring you amazing content. Your support means a lot. Thank you so much. Now let's get into the story. James Carter had been many things in his life. A soldier. A leader. A protector. He had fought in wars, seen things no man should see, and lost brothers who had never made it home. And despite it all, he had never once fought for himself. Until today. The battlefield of civilian life. James had been back home for years now, but sometimes it still felt like he was in enemy territory. Not the kind with bombs and bullets. The silent war. The looks. The whispers. The assumptions. The battle of being a black man in America, even after serving the country that still saw him as less than. Today was supposed to be simple. A quick stop at Monroe & Company, one of the most exclusive luxury boutiques in the city. He wasn't here to window shop. He was here because he had money to spend. Because unlike what they would assume, James Carter was very wealthy. Years of military benefits, speaking engagements, investments, he had built his fortune quietly. But he had learned, time and time again, that money didn't erase the color of his skin. And as he stepped into the store, he could already tell. Today would be no different. The moment they decided who he was. The second James crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. The soft jazz playing through the speakers felt staler. The scent of expensive perfumes in the air felt heavier. And the stares? Those were the worst. A rich, middle-aged white couple near the display cases glanced at him and immediately turned away. A young sales associate, blonde, sharp-faced, name tag reading Ashley, gave him a once-over and visibly hesitated. And then? Her expression changed. The subtle twist of her lips. The way her posture straightened, like she was preparing for something. James had seen it 1,000 times before. She had already made her decision. He didn't belong here. The first attempt to get him out. Ashley stepped forward, her heels clicking against the polished floor, stopping just in front of him. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice was polite, but not welcoming. "Can I help you?" James gave her a slow, calm nod. "I hope so. I'm looking for something special." Ashley's smile flickered. "Special?" James gestured toward the luxury watches behind the glass. "Something like that." Ashley didn't move. Instead, she folded her hands in front of her, her voice dropping into something sugary sweet, laced with condescension. "Sir, these are very high-end pieces. Our watches start at $10,000. James held her gaze. "That so?" Ashley gave a tight, rehearsed smile. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at our lower-tier selection." James let out a small breath. "Here we go. I didn't ask for your cheap selection. I asked for that." He pointed again to the case. Ashley hesitated. And that hesitation? That was all he needed to confirm what he already knew. She wasn't going to serve him. She was trying to get him out. The store manager joins the attack. Before Ashley could respond, a tall, slender man in an expensive navy suit approached. His name tag read, Richard Monroe. The manager. His sharp blue eyes swept over James with thinly veiled disgust. "Is there a problem here?" Richard asked. Ashley perked up immediately. "No problem, sir. This gentleman was just browsing." Browsing. A word that, in this context, meant wasting time. James clenched his jaw but kept his voice steady. "I'm interested in making a purchase." Richard gave a fake smile. "Sir, we have a very strict policy against loitering." Loitering. James exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around his cane. "I'm not loitering. I'm shopping." Richard tilted his head. Oh? And how exactly do you plan on paying? A beat of silence. James felt his patience snap. Are you asking every customer that, or just me? Richard's expression didn't change. Ashley smirked. And from across the room? A new voice cut in. Excuse me. Can someone help me? James turned his head. A wealthy white woman, draped in furs, covered in diamonds, waved dramatically from the other side of the store. Victoria Langley. One of those old money women who thought the world revolved around her. Ashley immediately turned away from James, ignoring him completely. Of course, Mrs. Langley. I'll be right there. Victoria wrinkled her nose, finally noticing James for the first time. Her disgust was instant. Is he supposed to be here? James stiffened. Richard Monroe gave a small, smug smile. He was just leaving. James stared him down. Actually, I wasn't. Victoria laughed. Oh, please. Do you even know how much things cost in here? James had enough. But before he could speak, a new threat entered the store. A uniformed security guard stepped in, his eyes locking onto James immediately. Ashley wasted no time. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. James' heart pounded. On what grounds? Richard, the manager, took another step forward. Sir, we don't cater to your kind. James felt rage burn through his veins. He had been treated like this before. But that didn't mean it hurt any less. The security guard stepped forward. You can walk out on your own, or I can escort you out. And just like that, James had a choice. Either he walked out quietly, or they would drag him out. Either way, they thought they had one. So James did something he rarely did. He walked toward the door. And just as he reached it, a young black man in a crisp business suit rushed in. His eyes landed on James, and widened in shock. Mr. Carter? Ashley scoffed. Oh, let me guess. Another one of your friends? The young man ignored her. Instead, he turned to Richard, the manager. And the words he spoke changed everything. James was seconds away from walking out that door. He had been humiliated, dismissed, treated like a criminal in a store where he had planned to spend thousands of dollars. They had one. Or at least, they thought they had. Because just as he reached the exit, a voice cut through the tension like a blade. Mr. Carter? James turned. And there, standing in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, was a young black man, his face a mix of shock and confusion. He knew that face. Marcus Daniels. One of the top executives at Monroe and Company. James had met him once at a veterans gala. A young man, sharp, ambitious, one of the few who had actually listened when James spoke about the realities of being black in America. And right now? Marcus looked furious. Ashley, the blonde saleswoman who had been so smug just moments ago, let out a nervous laugh. Oh, let me guess. Another one of your friends? Marcus ignored her. His focus was on James. Sir, is everything okay? James exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around his cane. I was just told I'm not welcome here. Marcus froze. His expression hardened instantly. He turned to Richard Monroe, the store manager. Mr. Monroe. What the hell is going on? Richard, who had spent the last 15 minutes looking down his nose at James, suddenly looked like he was choking on his own tongue. Ashley stepped in quickly. Oh, Marcus. It's nothing, just a simple misunderstanding. Marcus held up a hand, silencing her. A misunderstanding? He let out a bitter laugh. So tell me, Ashley, what exactly did you misunderstand? The fact that Mr. Carter is a paying customer? Or the fact that you just racially profiled a decorated war hero? Ashley's face drained of color. Victoria Langley, the rich Karen in the fur coat, stiffened. W8, war hero. Marcus slowly turned to James. Sir, may I? James knew exactly what Marcus was asking. A small smile tugged at his lips. Go ahead, son. Marcus turned back to the now visibly sweating employees and security guard. Then, in one slow, deliberate movement, he reached into James' coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He flipped it open. And inside? The Medal of Honor. The full weight of their mistake. Gasps rippled through the store. The customers who had been whispering before. Now they looked horrified. Victoria Langley clutched her pearls. Ashley took a stumbling step back. Richard Monroe? He looked like he had just witnessed his own funeral. James let the moment stretch out. Let them absorb what they had done. Then, with a slow, deliberate snap, he shut the box. And the sound? It might as well have been a gunshot in the dead silence of the store. The desperate scrambling. Ashley was the first to crack. W8, Mr. Carter, I didn't know. Marcus tilted his head. Didn't know what? That you just threw out an American hero? That you assumed he was poor? That you treated him like garbage? Ashley's face burned. She turned to James, her voice thin and desperate. Sir, James held up a hand. Don't. She snapped her mouth shut. Richard jumped in next, his usual arrogance gone. Mr. Carter, I assure you, this was all a misunderstanding. Please, allow me to offer you a... James cut him off. A discount? Richard flinched. Well, I was going to say an apology. James let out a low, humorless laugh. Let me tell you something, Mr. Monroe. When I was overseas, fighting in a war so you could sleep peacefully at night, no one cared what color my skin was. But the second I step into your fancy little store... His smile vanished. Suddenly, I don't belong. Richard's throat bobbed. Marcus took a step forward, his voice sharp. Mr. Monroe, let me make one thing very clear. Mr. Carter is the reason men like you even have the right to own a damn business in this country. And yet, you treated him like a criminal. So tell me. His eyes darkened. What do you think happens next? The full extent of their screw-up. The reality of the situation finally crashed down on them. Victoria Langley, the rich Karen, cleared her throat awkwardly. I was just following their lead. I didn't mean. James turned to her, his expression blank. Tell me, ma'am. What exactly did you think when you saw me? Victoria blanched. James nodded. That's what I thought. Ashley tried one last time. Sir, please, I didn't mean any harm. James finally let out a deep breath. And for the first time all day? He smiled. Because justice was coming. And they were about to learn exactly what that meant. James Carter had seen many things in his lifetime. War. Loss. Victory. But there was one thing he had never gotten used to, the casual cruelty of people who thought they were better than him. And today? Today had been a masterclass in just how deep that arrogance ran. He had come here as a customer. They had treated him like a criminal. And now? Now, they were scrambling to save themselves. And James? James was going to let them drown in the mess they made. The public humiliation. Ashley, the smug blonde saleswoman, was on the verge of tears. Mr. Carter, please, if I had known. James lifted a hand, cutting her off. If you had known I was a war hero? Ashley swallowed hard. Why yes. James shook his head. See, that's the problem. You think the only reason you should have treated me with respect is because of this. He flipped open the small velvet box, revealing his Medal of Honor once again. The shiny medal that, for the first time today, meant something to them. Not because they respected him, but because they feared what it meant. James let the weight of his words sink in. If I was just another black man, in simple clothes, minding my business, you would have had no problem tossing me out like trash. Ashley turned red, shifting on her feet. I didn't mean. James let out a humorless chuckle. Yeah, sweetheart, you didn't mean for me to catch you. The manager's last hope. Richard Monroe, the store manager, stepped forward next. He had run this store for 10 years. Never once had he felt powerless inside it. Until now. Until he realized he had just humiliated the wrong man. He cleared his throat, trying to recover. Mr. Carter, let's be reasonable here. James raised an eyebrow. Reasonable? Oh, now you want to be reasonable. Richard forced a tight smile. I just think this whole thing got out of hand. Let me offer you a personal shopping experience, a major discount. James' eyes darkened. You think I want a damn discount? Richard flinched. James stepped forward, standing toe-to-toe with the man who had insulted him minutes ago. Let me tell you something, Mr. Monroe. His voice was calm, but lethal. Money doesn't buy character. It doesn't buy class. It sure as hell doesn't buy common sense. Richard's jaw tensed. James let out a low laugh. You thought you were throwing out some nobody. Some poor black man who was browsing just to kill time. Richard opened his mouth to respond, but James wasn't done. But here's the thing, son. I fought for this country. I bled for it. I lost friends for it. And you? You couldn't even let me buy a damn watch. Richard's face burned with shame. Marcus Daniels, the senior VP, took a step forward now, his voice cold and clipped. Mr. Monroe, you don't work here anymore. Richard's head snapped up. What? Marcus crossed his arms. You're fired. Effective immediately. Richard looked around, as if hoping for backup. Ashley took a step back, not willing to go down with him. The customers, who had once been amused by James' mistreatment, now looked anywhere but at him. Because they all knew. Justice was here. And it was merciless. The final reckoning. Victoria Langley, the rich Karen who had laughed at James just minutes ago, let out a soft gasp. Wait. Fired? She turned to Marcus, clutching her pearls. Young man, I have been a loyal customer for years. Surely we can just move past this. Marcus let out a dry laugh. You mean the part where you mocked an American veteran and helped racially profile him? No, I don't think we can move past that. Victoria's cheeks burned with humiliation. James smirked. Come on, ma'am. I thought you wanted me out. Why don't you join me? Victoria stiffened. Marcus turned to Ashley next. You. Pack your things. You're done. Ashley let out a horrified squeak. Wait. Marcus, please. I was just following store policy. Marcus' eyes were like steel. Then consider this a new policy, racists don't work here. Ashley let out a choked sob. But James? James just watched. Because for once in his life, the system actually worked in his favor. The sweet taste of justice. As James turned toward the exit, the security guard, who had been so eager to throw him out earlier, gave him a sheepish look. James slowed, giving him one last glance. You gonna open the door for me, or do I still not belong here? The security guard swallowed hard, and immediately rushed to swing the doors open. James stepped out, the cool air hitting his face. Marcus followed him. Sir, let me personally apologize for what happened today. James chuckled, shaking his head. Son, you weren't the problem. You just cleaned up the mess. Marcus nodded. Then hesitated. Is there anything I can do for you? James glanced back at the store, where two freshly unemployed racists were still standing in shock. Then he turned back to Marcus. and smiled. You just did it. With that, he adjusted his cane, tipped his hat, and walked away. Because today, he won.